you please introduce yourself, say a little bit about yourself, so again, that people on the call know what angle you're coming from.
Okay, so my name's David. I'm chief exec of a national charity. I started off my career in the private sector. I was an accountant. I shifted across about 25 years ago and became the director of finance and admin for an adult hospice, and we built a children's hospice. Went into my current role 20 years ago, so I'm not very good at changing jobs. It's an umbrella national body. We have about 450 member groups that you would best know as League of Friends in hospitals. We also do some direct delivery of service. So things like we have direct beneficiaries in the building with us, people with brain injury and stroke. And alongside that, more by accident than design, I think I am chair of 14 charities, all small and local, nothing big. Everything's very much, does it capture my interest? And then I'm sort of suddenly find, oh yes, I've agreed to do that as well. Charity lives in the family. So my wife was a nurse. She's also a charity professional, and my son has gone into the charity world as well. So it's sort of, it's rubbed off on everybody. So yeah, that's fundamentally who I am, and that's what I do.
Amazing. Thank you, David. Angela, tell everyone a little bit about yourself as well.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me, Lucy. I'm originally from Sri Lanka, came here back in 2006, completed my master's, and I have no idea how I got into recruitment, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm a specialist recruiter in finance, and I also look after IT and facilities. I joined Charity People only back in 2021. And prior to that, I worked for another leading charity recruiter for a number of years, about 6 years. And the reason I love, or rather moved to Charity People, was because I worked with my managing director and a couple of other directors in the past, and just love the values. And I mean, don't get me wrong, everyone likes money, but a lot of recruiters, they tend to forget how important the candidates are. They tend to put the clients on top, but they always sometimes forget about the candidates. Whereas here at Charity People, and my own values and work ethics, I always look after my candidates and clients on the same level. And I'm very honest. I can be quite blunt with my clients and candidates. And that's because I always put myself in their shoes. And the way I see it is, if I can work in that charity, that's when I will work with that charity and place a candidate. In my entire career, I would say one of the proudest moments, I think this will make you happy. One of the finance candidates who I placed was a 76-year-old gentleman about 4 years ago, and he retired only last year.
Kudos to you. That's fantastic. That's wonderful.
And I still remember when he came to meet me, he was like, "Oh, you're just another recruiter who wants to meet me." And I was like, "No, I just want you to believe in me, and I believe in you, and you can get, I will find a place for you." So it's about working in partnership, and I'm here to answer any questions. I'm not an expert, of course, and I'm here to learn and from all of you. And see, that's my background. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Much appreciated. And for what it's worth, again, I think the wonderful stage about people at this stage in life is they're okay with not having bushes getting beaten around. If you want to give straight feedback, I think actually people probably quite enjoy it and find it reasonably refreshing, because we haven't got a huge amount of time to waste. So how about we hear from Sarah? So Sarah, thanks ever so much for joining us. Tell everyone a bit about yourself.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and hello everybody. I have been in the charity sector all my working life, right from when I left university. Basically got in through local campaigning. That was what I was doing, sort of grassroots stuff. So I've always worked in small charities. So I had about a dozen years working for different small campaigns, and then I landed a part-time chief executive's role, which I filled for 24 years, because you weren't going to shift me out of that, basically. As a working mother, I needed the flexible working that what is now known as working families gave me. And so that took me up till 2018. Working Families is a work-life balance charity. We worked, well, we're very good. It's a good example of a campaigning charity, which you will find. So basically, the charity does three things. It does direct service provision, so it's running a legal advice service for working parents and carers. It does best practice work with employers, so helping employers to understand, you know, how to employ people better if they've got care responsibilities. So what you're doing from both those two aspects, you're pulling together evidence of problems and solutions. And then it's a campaigning organisation. So it's doing political campaigning, bringing that evidence to bear on both sides, and being able to say we're not party pre, because we work with both sides of this equation, and also changing attitudes publicly. So that took me up until 4 or 5 years ago. I am now a freelance person working on flexible working issues. I'm a speaker, I'm a writer, I'm an advisor. But half my week is pro bono charity work. So I'm chair of one charity and a trustee of two others. I'm chair of PIPA, Parents and Carers in Performing Arts. That is an organisation that is looking to where it works with across the performing arts in the UK on those work-life balance issues. So how do you get, if you're a theatre or a dance company or an orchestra, how do you employ people who've got parenting and caring responsibilities in an inclusive way? And then I'm a general trustee of two other charities, Rosa, which is a grant making fund. It's a feminist grant maker funding grassroots women's and girls work across the UK, and then Scottish Opera, which is obviously very different kettle of fish, very big organisation with sort of close on 200 staff and another couple of hundred freelancers. So I've got a really lovely, in my view, a very lovely balance of voluntary work, paid work, and the different scales of the voluntary sector to be experiencing.
Yeah, and thank you. And again, hopefully that gives everyone a bit of an idea as to where you're each coming from. One of the kind of questions I'd like to kick off with, if that's all right, is what are the things that the charity sector need most in terms of skills and abilities?
I'm going to come from the finance perspective. Since specializing in finance, IT and facilities, to be honest, on a daily basis, I sadly turn down a number of candidates who want to move from the commercial sector to the charity sector. But I just don't turn them down, because I have some brilliant case studies of where, especially when it comes to mid to senior level, sort of your head of finance to directors of finance, they are sometimes on over 100,000 salary. And like what Sarah mentioned, they want to join the sector for the cause, or they really want to make an impact. But it's quite a difficult transition to make, because on a very senior level, there's this reporting standard in finance called the charity SORP. So what I tend to do is the advice I've given, and I'm quite fortunate these candidates have embraced it, is I've told them to become a trustee or a treasurer, and to sort of get in through working for or rather doing it on a pro bono basis for a small to medium-sized charity. So then they will get that experience and exposure, so they can bring their commercial acumen into a charity, because the charity sector is no longer sort of sitting behind the computer, or they are becoming very commercially minded. They have to get the people to spend their money. So by going in as a trustee and treasurer, they can easily make that transition. Because one of the candidates who I placed, and I'm still in touch with, he was a director of finance for a large multinational commercial organization, and he was on over 125,000. I told him to become a treasurer or trustee and then get into finance. And 3 years later, he got in touch with me by saying he's now a treasurer working for Age UK and whether I can help him. And I was able to place him as a finance manager for 50,000, where he was actually processing invoices and he set up the finance function. Whereas on an IT and facility side, the transition is much more easier, I would say, because IT and facilities, it's very technical. You're looking after a building. So most of the candidates who I've placed are from the commercial sector. So I think it depends on the level and also educating clients. Again, an example I can give from this week is I'm working on junior finance officer roles. Now, even though the clients requested they wanted charity experience, just by meeting the candidate and getting to know them and they wanting to, they're believing in the organization and wanting to deliver, bring their skills and experience, I was able to put the candidates in front of the client, and now they're interviewing for these roles. Does that answer your question, or do I have to elaborate, or what do you think, Lucy?
Sorry, I'll mute myself. Thank you, Angela. All right, so then there's something clearly around there are some absolute basic skills requirements. So whatever the job is, if there's something that's very specific, i.e. regulatory reporting on that financial sector, you're not going to get a job without some sort of previous experience. So the point is, make sure you go and get it. But generally speaking, other areas within the charity sector, potentially if it's not finance, maybe the transition in might be slightly easier. What's your perspective on that, David and Sarah?
So I think that yes, things like charity finance, I would never have taken somebody who didn't have charity finance experience, because the world is so different. And if you want a policy person, they've got to know the issues. But I think fundamentally any role that you're carrying out in the private or public sector, it exists in the third sector as well. Of course it does. So it's really a case of what's the cause that motivates you? What are you interested in? And identify the organizations that you're interested in, and then look and see what jobs they've got. And they're almost certain to have the job you're already doing, I would have thought. But Angela's point about get yourself on a board or do some volunteering, be able to show me as an interviewer that you understand it's a different sector and you've got a handle on the culture, because I've had too many people come into my organization who have found the culture shock too much. It's just work, especially if you go into a small organization. You've got very tight budgets, a little money goes a very long way, there's no slack, but actually we tend to be very agile. There's not a lot of bureaucracy, there's not a lot of hierarchy. So people from bigger structured organizations can find a small third sector organization quite unsettling in its fluidity, and also completely thrown back by how far a small amount of money can be made to go. We used to do a lot of work with big corporates. We'd partner with them, we would do events, we'd do research. And at the beginning of my career, I would go in with a voluntary sector cringe. Oh my goodness, I'm working with a big city brand, they must be so efficient. They weren't.
I can vouch for that.
We were slicker, tighter, more efficient, made our money go further. Absolutely. And so it's a very different culture, I think, if you're coming into a small charity.
Definitely.
Yeah, really nice. How about you, David? What sort of things do you look for in people that might be applying to your organisation?
I mean, it's really interesting because I'm thinking back sort of 25 years ago about how the world was then and how I think the world is now. And 25 years ago, I would say that there were people, some people who were applying to the sector who thought that the sector somehow was an easier place to work. That,
I've heard that before.
And there was sort of this sense that they'd struggled in either the public sector or the private sector, and they somehow thought that somehow we were nicer in the voluntary sector. And I always say that actually, as a charity, our staff are not beneficiaries. They are not the beneficiaries of the charity. You know, there's somebody else who's supposed to be the beneficiary. So actually, we all need to be working as hard as we can to support our vision and our mission and what we're supposed to be there for. For me, yeah, you know, I hear, and again, I'm used to working in smaller organizations. It's really a lot about recruiting for attitude. I always say that if somebody doesn't know something, then we can probably train them if they've got the right attitude, and they're going to fit, and they're going to, you know, yeah, I'm going to be amazed at their creativity. And, you know, picking up on the agility comment that was made just now, I don't think I'd love to say that I did, but I don't think I ever really know more than about a year ahead what I think we're definitely going to be doing. There might be, because of the way the funding streams work.
Yeah.
And I think one of the Institute of Fundraising comments that I really like is, charities exist because donors want a problem solved. Now, we don't necessarily always exist because there's a need out there. You know, when I was in the hospice world and I was taught that, I thought, no, we don't exist because of that. We exist because actually the NHS doesn't do a great job with dying people. We exist because families need extra support. But actually, what you soon learn in the voluntary sector is if there ain't enough income, then you can't do whatever it is that you want to do. So actually, there's a huge amount in the work that we do in the voluntary sector about trying to explain what our beneficiaries want and being able to get people who might have funding to match and come in and come alongside us. And sometimes that doesn't always work. You know, sometimes we're in a time, you know, where there's a pandemic, or we're in a time where people think people are living in a lot of financial hardship, and it's difficult to get funding in for whatever the particular cause that you are really passionate about. So we do have to be really quite fleet of foot. And that's what I like about when I talk to staff. You know, I love to see that sense of creativity and passion, because we may have to fight in very difficult times, and we may have to change the way we do something quite rapidly because funding suddenly disappears or dries up.
I'm interested to get a sense from the group. How many people here have actually, maybe just to show with your hands, how many people have actually already applied to jobs in the charity sector? So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, feel free to pop in the chat what potential barriers or what frustrations you might have experienced, because then again, we've got some people here who might be able to kind of advise how it is that you can potentially get around those points. For all of you three, so while you're doing that, while you're kind of popping things in the chat, I guess the other question that I'd say is, you've all really alluded to get some experience, demonstrate to me that you are committed to the role through whether it's the trusteeships, whether it's sitting on a board. Where are the best places for people to find out about those sorts of opportunities? You've got the NCVO, haven't you, the National Centre of Voluntary Organisations, which tends to be a bit of an umbrella catch-all organisation for it as well. But I mean, are most opportunities, do they tend to be pasted on your own websites? Like, would you always then seek to put them onto something like NCVO?
There's a really, really good website called gettingonboard.org. Really fantastic. And that's been set up as a resource for people who are looking for trusteeships. And so it pulls everything together. And it's got links to all the different websites where you can find treasurerships or general trusteeships, or London specific or Scottish, you know, whatever. I would really encourage you. It's gettingonboard.org. It's full of resources. It's an absolute trove of interesting stuff that will teach you, also, give you a real sense of the sector.
Look at that. I've popped it in the chat for people who haven't done it. And then how about, I mean, anything, David, for example, across your organisations, do you tend to always sort of put things on your own website before you put things in other places?
I would say if I wanted to go and do anything in the sector, and I got something I was particularly interested in. In the sector, generally, we do quite like talking about ourselves, and we're usually quite passionate about what we do. What I would do is I would identify an organisation and potentially the individual in the organisation. Say you're thinking of going for a career change, and would they be able to spare you, 45 minutes to have a coffee with you, so you could chat it through. And probably my whole career has been littered with those sorts of conversations with different people. I always say that, you know, if you'll bring a latte and come at 5 o'clock, then I'll have 45 minutes for you. You know, I'm very shallow in that sense.
I mean, it might be a latte for you. It's a glass of wine or a slice of cake for me.
And I'm not as generous as you in time, but I'm always up for 20 minutes. You know.
Okay. And you know, and now, and particularly now that Zoom has taken over our lives, Zoom calls are really quite helpful for those sorts of conversations.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
But what I would say comes out of that is that if it's a sector or an organisation that you're passionate about, you've got that pitch moment, and it may not be that at that point there's something for you, but they may, I would always, if there was somebody who I thought might be more helpful than me, refer you on to one of my mates, you know, from my little black book, and say, contact them. You know, I definitely think that we're good potentially at trying to help people into the sector if they're the right people, and just try and go for that one-to-one relationship.
That's great. Sorry.
Go ahead, Angela.
Thank you, Lizzie. That's great to hear that from David, because that's what I tell my candidates, or rather the candidates who want to get into to make that move. So what I advise my candidates who approach me is, you have the thing called LinkedIn, and then there's Google, and you can easily find who the hiring manager is, or who the CEO or the director of fundraising or the director of HR. Then approach them and tell them that, you know, can I have about 10 minutes to have a chat with you by Teams or Zoom? So it's great to hear it coming from David that it's something he is very much open to. So that's great.
Yeah.
But I would say you don't have to be going to the top. You can be looking for somebody in an organisation that interests you, who's doing a job similar to the role that you currently are doing or have been doing. So, you know, if you're a comms person, find a comms person to talk to. If you're a salesperson, find a fundraiser. You have to just, and they're not going to get you into a job, but they're going to help you understand more about the lie of the land, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And I always say to people, you know, if you're then in an interview scenario at some point down the line, even to say things like, yes, I was chatting to so-and-so in fundraising, or I asked so-and-so for a cup of coffee. I mean, you're going to be ticking that proactivity box. Bang on. I've just noticed in the chat, huge congratulations, Adrian. Tell us a bit about your role.
Hi there.
Hi, well done. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Literally today. So
oh, come on, show us your glass of wine. Here's a beer.
It's not here yet. I literally just got back in from taking my daughter to tennis, and now I'm trying to get the dinner ready as well as listen to this to learn what I need to do.
That's commitment. Not only have you got a job in the charity sector as of today, but you're joining this Zoom call as well. I mean, again, you definitely tick the box. We'll tell your charity that you're 5 steps ahead already.
Yeah.
Well done. So, okay, so you're alluding to something here, though, in your thing in your chat about maybe there are some things, you know, eyes wide open shocks to the system. I'd, again, like to hand over to our panel. What are the eyes wide open messages? What are the things, so before someone applies, what do they really need to understand about the charity sector? So Sarah, I know you've got something to say here.
Yes, I do actually. This is very personal, what I want to say, but I have an allergy to the phrase giving back. I've had too many people sworn in to my office to say, I want to give back, and here I have, you know, all this stuff I'm going to give back. I don't want you giving back, okay? I want you to come and work hard. I want you to be working for my organisation because you believe in the cause, because you're aligned with our purpose, and not because you are feeling that it's coming back to that thing about if you're working for a charity, you're working with the people who we are there to support. It's not about doing anything to people, and I think there is just a slight uncomfortableness about this giving back notion, and you'll hear it all. It is personal to me, okay, and you will hear people use it in the sector. But for me, it's always a bit of an alarm bell, both in terms of if I was interviewing for trustees or if I was interviewing for new staff. If they said that their motivation for coming to the interview was that they wanted to give back, immediately I was going, whoa, not so comfortable. What I was really looking for was an understanding of the cause and some sort of interest or commitment. You know, why is my cause important to you? Yeah. Do you have lived experience, or do you have an intellectual engagement, or do you have family or friends who've been affected by whatever the issue is? But why is it that you think that this organisation is really important and therefore you're going to throw your energies in? That's what I'm looking to hear. Yeah,
I think that's really important. And I do remember we had somebody somebody I was working with who was very, very senior. I mean, he was the CEO of a very well-known FTSE 100 company. And he was saying, you know what, I want a job with more purpose now. I want to give back. I'm going to go and run something like Sport UK England or something like that. And just looking at him with your eyes wide open going, what, you think it's that easy? Well, there's a bunch of Olympic athletes and people have been doing this for like 20 years who've been in that organisation who also want that job, but you're going to somehow gift yourself to the sector. You might need a bit of reality check. Probably not that easy. What about you, Angela? What would be the thing that, you know, you really don't want any CVs of people who are not aware of X, Y, or Z? What's the thing that you want them to know about the sector before they apply for a job?
Definitely the culture, the shift in the culture, mindset, and salary. Those are the three, because culture, because coming from the commercial sector, they again give back. No, it's not. And also it's not a sector where it's, oh, let me retire, stay there and retire, it's very easy. No, charity sector is much more. They are looking for very sharp people, very driven people, because you are getting someone else to take money from their pocket and fund you so that the beneficiaries will, you know, you can help your beneficiaries and or the membership bodies, etc. So, you know, you're looking, so culture, and then of course the salary, because for example, finance officer, I can say, in the commercial organization may get about 36,000, but in the charity sector you're looking at about 29,000. So again, you know, just to be aware of that. So that's giving back, you know, wanting to work for a nice sector, and understanding environment. Yes, all of that is good, but they have to have the mindset that charities are changing. They're moving at a very fast pace, and they are looking for highly sharp people to join their organization. And the culture, and again, even though it's fast paced, they are not looking for people to just come in and change everything overnight. They want people who can come in and who will understand, who will respect their staff, and who will know, and who can bring in the transition slowly and adapt to it. So someone who is very driven, who wants to come in and change everything overnight, that will not sit well with especially small to medium-sized organizations, or even in teams. Those are the main three things I would say.
All right. David, what do you not want someone coming in thinking or believing, and you then having to manage huge amounts of expectation?
I think that for me, the biggest challenge can be around understanding how the governance structure works and how that affects how we deliver on a daily basis in the organisation. So, you know, I've lots of colleagues over the years. So we will all understand that we've got this board of trustees who are effectively responsible for the organisation. You know, there's a great relationship potentially with the chief exec, but trustees will have very different views potentially on how the organisation should look and run. And so sometimes decisions are easy to get through and sometimes they're not. So, you know, I can remember having a long laboured decision in a board discussion about why we have a Christmas shutdown. And, you know, and something like that, because we had some people who said, well, you know, in our public sector job, we don't get a Christmas shutdown. So why are we allowing your staff to have a Christmas shutdown? Because we're not the public sector. That's why. And, you know, we're a different organisation with a different style. And then, you know, you have some, you know, I had a treasurer once who said that they thought I should get a bonus. The rest of the board thought they were going to choke at that point. You know, so I think there's a huge amount, we touched on the word culture, but there's a huge amount about us quite often having to juggle lots of different expectations as an organisation as part of our delivery. And things, they can be very quick and easy sometimes, but other times they can actually feel really quite laboured and difficult. You know, and to pick up on, you know, an issue of today, you know, I've got staff who, like lots of people in the world, you know, they're worried about their heating, they're worried about this, they're worried about that. And I'm saying, I've got no income. And actually, I am struggling to give you, you know, a 2% pay rise this year because my income hasn't gone up. Yeah. And so, you know, thinking about perhaps the different way that an organisation works, its finances, its governance, that does really affect to me, the flavour of how an organisation can feel.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely point. And I think, I mean, is there, as far as any of you guys are aware, is there a place that someone can kind of read, do a course? I've noticed, thank you, Amina, for putting it in the chat. But is there somewhere that you would recommend people go if they do need to kind of get their head around the governance and the structure of charities, for them to kind of get a bit of a head start if they want to embellish and give some credibility to their application and CV?
Getting on boards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Brilliant. Well, that's all right. We've already got it. It's in the chat. Value are you getting already? Giving you the website. Brilliant. We've touched a couple of times on salary. Could you give us an idea of some of the ranges and the kind of the typical trajectory or career progression if someone was coming into the charity sector later on in life? So, I mean, typically people that we look at with our audience are sort of over the age of 45. What might their options look like from a kind of a salary and a trajectory perspective? I mean, David, why don't we start with you?
Well, my immediate response to that is it depends what size of organisation they're going into. So, you know, your big nationals have got, you know, much better and well-developed structures and salary scales. So I'm thinking of a young lady who came to us quite a long time ago. She was a qualified accountant. She'd worked for a big private sector organisation in a very senior role in finance, and her life had sort of unravelled a bit, and she'd moved up from the West Country into London, and she came and did some volunteering, really just to draw breath while she was at her parents' and work out what she wanted to do. She has ended up in quite a senior role. She poodled about with us for about a year, but she now is in quite a senior role with a national charity in finance. And she reckons that it's not as much as she was, but, you know, she's in a comparable sort of salary. But equally, if you look at my organisation, so we do, I'll probably show my age here. We do a lot of students who are on sandwich courses come in and do work with us. So they do thick sandwiches or thin sandwiches. Thin sandwiches, they will come for 3 months, a thick sandwich is 6 months. And when those sorts of students come, I find it really interesting because they all have a perception that, you know, so I'm in a nice building. My nice building is the King's Fund in Cavendish Square, where we rent some offices. So, you know, it looks fantastic. It's got beautiful staircases. The toilets have won awards. But actually, you know, there is a sense that that is sort of a very thick veneer on the reality. And the reality is that for many of them, that starting salaries are actually quite low. For youngsters who are coming into the sector, there are many people, you know, that we might have who are also volunteering alongside them. So, you know, they might be working and volunteering or whatever. So we tend to have, as I say, the beneficiary of the charity is not the member of staff. So we are going to make that money go a long way if we possibly can.
Yeah.
If somebody is fantastic and they're going to change the world for us, we will try and find the money and move heaven and earth to make that happen. But there is a reality that, you know, you are robbing Peter to pay Paul at one level. You know, money's going to have to come from somewhere. Oh, we can't have the IT upgrade this year because we're going to pay for this member of staff. And that's the sort of decision, which means that, you know, going back to Sarah's point, we're really looking for people who this is something which they care passionately about, and there's something about it that they really feel connected to, and they want to make a difference through that activity. And while we want to, you know, pay them as fairly as we can, very often that is a struggle for us. The salary bill, you know, the salary bill for some of us, when that's about to go through, we have to check the bank and hold our breath to make sure that this month's salary is going to get paid for everybody.
It's an interesting point, actually, because you know, we've been running our own survey, and if we look at the factors that most people are looking for at this kind of stage in people's lives, actually out of 7 different factors, finance is number 6 on the list. You know, far higher up the list are things like opportunities for flexible working, opportunity to learn something new, a chance to feel like I'm making a difference, and, you know, doing something that feels a bit more purposeful. I think actually the charity sector would tick a lot of kind of value boxes for people. And actually that stage in people's lives where they can potentially afford not to earn as much as they did when they were younger, because now they've already got the house, or maybe the mortgage has been paid off. It kind of falls into the realm of people who've had the benefit of potentially a lot of years of experience under their belt to be able to potentially afford to kind of work in that manner, serving those sorts of values. So interesting when you say about the thick and thin. I want some of those thick and thin opportunities for the over 50s cohort as well, David. I'll be talking to you about that afterwards, make no mistake. Oh, yes.
Lucy, could I pick up on flexible working as
yes,
the over 50s really
please,
want, and say that actually the voluntary sector is, I think, fairly patchy on flexible working. You will find good practice, but if it's something that's important for you, really ask and check it out. Have those make the questions happen at interview to really find out whether the culture truly is flexible, because there's an awful lot of wrapping yourself in the flag in our sector. And so what may look like flexibility on paper, you will discover when you get into the job, you are just expected to work all hours God sends. There's a real culture of burnout in a lot of voluntary sector organisations. And it's not everywhere, and some are very good. You'll find some very good practice in some places, and the sector has just done a big study, which NCVO did, on flexible working. But, you know, don't expect, I think we've always felt as a sector that we can say, oh, well, we don't pay so well, but we're nice people and you get flexibility. Well, actually, we don't pay so well. Actually, quite a lot of us are not very nice people. Because we're not very good managers, because we haven't been properly trained, because our organisations don't invest in training us, because you've got to spend the money on the recipients or the beneficiaries, and we're not very flexible because we expect you to be at your desk for as forever, because the need can never be solved. That's the problem. And I think I guess that would be my real message, is if you're looking at a job in a voluntary organisation, just try and get a sense of that culture. Is it a realistic culture? Is it professional? That's really what I'm saying. Because if it's professional, then it means that the people working there understand that the need can never be met. There's always more to do than you can possibly do with the resources that you have at your disposal. And if that's not the case, then your donors ought to be asking some pretty hard questions, I think. But look for that professionalism that therefore is also looking at the well-being of the staff, because David, you're quite right. You know, your staff are not there, they're not the beneficiaries. Your staff are there to work hard and purposefully for the people who need the charity's support. But to do that, they've got to be well looked after. They've got to be well trained. They've got to be well managed. Their own health and well-being has got to be at a premium. So those are the kinds of questions I would be asking. I wouldn't let yourself be blinded by the just the cause. That comes first, but then see how they manage people.
Good.
And that's, I mean, you've got a comment in the chat there from Sally saying, thank you very much for the reality check on that one, Sarah. And I think, you know, maybe what Maya's doing, you know, kind of trying to create these internship opportunities for people. Hopefully, you know, if that evolves, Maya, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my career is the opposite to David and Sarah, because I spent 25 years in the, more than that, in the commercial world and 2 years in the charity sector. And I found it incredibly hard to get into the charity sector. I wish I'd been on this webinar 5 years ago, because so much of it, what has been said about attitude, having the right attitude, really thinking about the difference in the culture in a charity is, in my experience, so different from working in a commercial organization. And two of the questions, anyone who is going to start working in charity, I would say to you, ask yourself the questions, how am I expected to behave and how will I belong? And just keep reminding yourself those questions, you know, at the end of every week, at the end of every fortnight, because my mistake was to not listen enough at the beginning and not to observe how people were working. And I'd come from a background where I had a lot of autonomy to make decisions, and I wasn't used to, consensus decision making. So it's things like that. Don't think that you've got all the right answers, and don't look frustrated in a meeting because a decision, because you've spent an hour talking around the houses and you still haven't got to a point of deciding. It's just a very different way of working, and you have to really unthink how you've worked before. I'm going off tangent now, but so I've worked in charity for 2 years, and for family reasons, I left that because we're moving to another part of London, settling a child into school, wanted to be present for that. And then I needed work. So I wanted to go back, stay in the third sector, because it's so rewarding. It's just so fantastic to work for something you really have a passion for and believe in the way that I never felt passionate about selling Nokia smartphones or getting people to watch Paul Hollywood on the Food Network. It's, so I've been applying for jobs, and this is with experience in the charity sector, can't get interviews. And I don't know, but I think it's my age that's now the barrier. So, don't start me on recruitment is ageist, because I will take up the rest of the time. So I thought, well, if I can't get a great job, I will make my great job. So I'm in the process of founding a non-profit called Charity Interns. No idea how far it's going to get, but I'm having good fun doing it. The fact that the URL charityinterns.com was up for grabs just shows you there's a huge gap in the market. There's another charity job site called Charity Jobs, and they did some research that showed that 2/3 of their active users are outside the sector. NCVO has done research showing that the charity sector is struggling to recruit. So I just thought, put those two things together. There are vacancies. There are people who want to work in those vacancies. Yeah. They haven't got charity experience. A word of caution about volunteering is think strategically about the volunteering opportunities, because working in a charity shop is not going to help you if you want to be a marketing director in a charity. So yeah. I live in Barnet now, and there's a children's hospice called Noah's Ark. My CV is completely light on fundraising, and I've been turned down for marketing roles because I don't have fundraising experience. Yeah. So I'm now going to do some volunteering with them as an advocate, which is all linked in with their fundraising, because I want to do it, but it's all going to be useful for me in future job applications. So anyway, charityinterns.com. If you go there, it's a very basic website for the moment, but I needed somewhere to start building a database. Yeah. I'm talking to charity leaders. I want to run a pilot in the summer with 4 internships, 6 months, paid at the real living wage. There'll be training before about the charity culture. There'll be peer-to-peer network as you go through it. Brilliant. And I'd love you to all sign up. And once I've got some internships, hopefully I can help you.
So there you go. So for people who want some experience, baby paid, go and connect on her charityinterns.com site. Coming back to everyone else, what questions do you have that haven't already been answered? Or observations? And by the way, Adrian, good luck with your new start after what Sarah was saying. Yeah, maybe not quite so flexible. Hope that goes down well.
Well, while the people are coming up with their questions, could I just respond to actually pick up and follow on from Sarah's point, but Sarah and Angela may feel slightly differently, I don't know. So for me, from where I'm sitting at the moment, I would agree wholeheartedly with Sarah that we are really not as flexible and as loving as we might be generally in the sector.
Yeah.
You know, when I started work, I went from working for a firm of chartered accountants in the city to a hospice. I mean, honestly, I think they thought they bought my soul. I mean, and there were people who'd been there, it was 15 years into its life, who'd been there since it was founded, and somehow, you know, you were always going to be the new boy in the village, and somehow your contribution was never ever going to be as great as theirs. And frankly, it never was going to be, because I just couldn't, you know, a small child couldn't do everything that they wanted. However, what I would say is my experience, and I'm interested in you know, if anybody else has any different, is that the voluntary sector, you know, the whole lockdown, everything else has thrown us into a state of shock to start with. And people are beginning to recognize that they have to be different in the sector. So for those of you that are looking for a way in, it may feel at some points in your discussions, depending on the organization, that we aren't quite as clear and settled in our thinking. So if you look at my own organization, you know, we are now seriously looking at how with, you know, whatever hybrid working, hot desking and all of the rest of it genuinely looks like. We've sort of fought off some of it and some of it has gone on, but certainly my experience is that the sector has suddenly worked out it can't afford its offices anymore, so it's got to think differently. It's not inspired, unfortunately, by trying to give people better working conditions. It's inspired by pressure on cost. But I think that the sector is waking up to the fact that it needs to think differently and change, but that may just be the organizations that I'm talking to.
Yeah, interesting. Questions from people that, like I say, haven't been, over to you guys.
Yeah, maybe following up on that, I was just wanted to ask whether maybe the panelists could provide some color on kind of, you know, the job market these days, because I've heard from some charities actually there's kind of a hiring freeze at the moment, obviously, you know, given the multitude of crises, not the least of which the cost of living crisis happening at this time. So I was just wondering whether there's any insight from, you know, charity people, but also from David and Sarah on that.
Good question. Thank you, Amina. Go ahead, Angela. Which other, you know, what's your perspective on the sector?
I would say the charities are hiring, definitely, but the roles are depending on, I mean, for example, the fundraising, they're constantly looking for staff, constantly. Finance, slow down, IT and facilities, people usually stay put, very rarely they tend to move from them. So charities are hiring. What I would say is, Ermina, if you attend an interview, and I'm talking from a recruiter point of view, a lot of recruiters, they tend to say, you know what, unfortunately, you did not get the role because you just didn't have enough experience. That is a very safe answer for recruiters to say. Please push back, because with my candidates, I always ask my clients to give me very constructive feedback on why my candidates have been rejected, because I have a duty of care towards my candidates and I want to help them, to help, you know, to interview for the next role. So there are roles out there, and if you are applying or if you attend an interview, please push the client or your recruiter for feedback, because don't just go with find they've gone with somebody else, ask for constructive feedback. Yeah.
Thank you. David, Sarah, have you got any thoughts for Amina? Are there any particular sectors or within the charity sector that you know might be heavily recruiting at the moment, or no?
I mean, all three of mine are recruiting right now. It's not that means, you know, I can point to about 2 or 3 jobs that may be open, but I would just say that in my experience, we really struggle with finance, good finance, good operations, obviously fundraising. I mean, fundraising is a whole other thing to talk about. Great, you know, comms people are in great demand. Basically, we're like any other organisation or business in the UK. We are looking for talent. It's a war for talent. We don't have the skills and experience in the UK that we need, and we don't have the numbers that we need. So we are competing just as hard as everybody else, but we're not competing on salary, sadly.
Yeah. I mean, if I was to sort of summarise some of the things that I'm hearing tonight, you know, I would definitely say that people here, if you're thinking about applying to the charity sector, because they can't compete on salary, you have to show that you're passionate and interested in whatever that reason or whatever that charity that you're applying to is asking you to be. You have to have some sort of experience. So try and get a trusteeship, try and demonstrate you've got some volunteer time under your belt. Don't go into it thinking it's going to be an easy ride, because it's not. It's not always going to be the best or the most well-managed organisation, because there's that constant tug between the job and the beneficiaries and having to prioritise salary for the beneficiaries. But actually, I'm also picking up that it can be the most rewarding sector as well. So, you know, if you are in that sector, the chance for it to meet some of the sorts of things that I know are really important for people in this stage in their life, there's probably no better match. Yeah.
It's a fabulous sector. It's a wonderful sector. It's full of wonderful people. I've been really mean about everybody I've worked with for the last 30 or 40 years. You know, isn't it, Adrian? David, sorry. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you meet somebody in the sector and you think, I don't quite get that person, just spend 5 minutes with them and find out why they're there and what's given them their passion, because their stories are so great. You know, I win awards for rushing about and not concentrating, but I have to say, I can never ever understand when people say they don't enjoy their job, because no matter, you know, I do tear my hair out some days. I can find it very frustrating, but I love what I do, and I've loved what I've done for 20 years.
Can I ask a question of Sarah and David? Do you think that there is a suspicion of people who've worked all their careers in charities, when someone later in their career, maybe after 20, 30 years, want to switch, there's this sort of like, well, where were you 30 years ago?
No.
Okay.
Well, not from my point of view anyway. You know, this stuff about you know, this idea that perhaps people are ageist and all the rest of it. I mean, a lot of us in the sector, particularly in sort of middle and senior management, we've got a fair few grey hairs ourselves. You know, you're talking to people who are like you.
Yeah, no, but that I'm talking about people being recruited at 55, 60, not who are 55, 60 because they've been within the organisation.
I think there's just as much ageism in the sector as there is anywhere else. I think.
Oh no, I completely agree. Yeah. No, I didn't mean just the charity. I mean jobs in general.
But I don't think there's anything. There is a degree of, you know, there is a degree of cynicism about, there are certain kinds of people from certain kinds of backgrounds who seem to parachute in and end up being the chief exec of certain kinds of charities.
Right.
You know, but generally speaking, I don't think there's any, you know, any recruiter in the sector is, or any senior leader in the sector is just looking for people who get the cause and who really want to contribute.
I would say the only question I might have in the back of my mind if I was talking to somebody was that one about whether they thought it was an easy ride, a roll down to retirement, those sorts of questions. Yeah. That might be a question, but that would be a question I would ask in my mind of anybody of any age. But you know, when I read papers which are suggesting that the government by the time I get to retire, and I'm 57, you know, I might have to work till I'm 70 to get a pension. I'm like thinking, well, there are going to be lots of people who are going to be looking for new jobs at 65, aren't there? So this is going to be a cultural change that we're going to have to get used to.
Very true.
Across all sectors.
And an amazing opportunity for businesses who get it right. You know, you can get some wonderful people. But yeah, flexible working, charity sector might have to do something about the flexible working side of things to really get them. I'm conscious of time, everyone, and I said that we would wrap things up at 7 o'clock. So the thing I will say to you all, and it's really wonderful to see you all, if there's something else that you want to follow up with, you've seen how small a group it is, right? If there was something that you didn't get a chance to ask tonight, or if you felt a little uncomfortable kind of speaking out in front of a group, that's totally fine. But there is no excuse. You get in touch with me, you email me, I will connect you up. There is, you know, the benefit and the beauty of a small organization is that we can build and make some of those meaningful connections. So I'm just going to say a huge thank you to Sarah, David, Angela, Maya, thank you for coming as well. But, you know, honestly, to all of you, I mean, the charity sector needs people who are passionate and interested. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that the people in our membership are exactly the sort of people that the charity sector need. So I hope you take something really positive from this. And I think that the encouragement to then apply for jobs in the sector, and if you have any trouble, we will basically connect you up and sort you out. All right, so lovely to see you all. Thank you all very much. Have a lovely evening. Good luck, Adrian. Can you come to our next monthly member meeting and tell us all how it's going?
Yeah, I'm planning to start. I think it's the 6th of February. So yeah.
Happy days. All right, so I think it's actually the date of our next new monthly member meeting. So yeah, great. You tell us how your first day's gone.
Will do.
All right, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good luck, everyone.
All the best.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.